DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Have you noticed these words and this acronym has been a trending topic, not only for our daily lives, but also a valuable conversation for our corporate culture? Not only companies are making this opportunities for a diverse talent group, but also changing their business outlook on this. What are your thoughts on that, George?
Indeed, Anirban, there is a lot of potential and value in those words. Diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI, has power far beyond buzzwords and corporate workshops. Rather, genuine involvement and investment in DEI has the capacity to shape the trajectory of the world. So what do you think? Are DEI programs overrated or underrated?
Well, there's only one way to find out. Stay tuned to our episode to learn more.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Welcome to another episode of the Dapper Dollars podcast, where we answer your finance questions, but a bit with style. I'm Anirban. We also have George, and we're the host for your show. So, George, what are we talking about today?
Today, we're talking DEI and DEI efforts. You see, when we empower and include diverse talent pools through equitable opportunities and for advancement, everyone benefits, you see, through enhanced innovation and productivity, lowering poverty rates, and actually increasing health and employment outcomes, and so much more. So we hope to have a very thought-provoking discussion around today's climate of DEI. So, Anirban, who are we speaking with today?
Today, we have the pleasure to introduce LaDrica Derrico. She is an associate director at wholesale business at AT&T. She's received a dual BBA in finance and managerial sciences from Georgia State University and her MBA from the University of Georgia. She is currently the president of the NETwork DFW chapter of Black Integrated Professionals, where they provide opportunities for networking to build future generational leaders. LaDrica is a native of Atlanta, Georgia, an avid runner, and a member of the Dallas alumni chapter of Delta Sigma Theta sorority. Welcome to LaDrica.
Hi, thank you guys for having me. I'm really excited to be here today.
So before we get into the topic of whether DEI programs are overrated or underrated, let's start with a fun icebreaker question. As Dapper Dollars, we always like to ask our guests. So let's just say $10 million show up in your bank account. What would you do with that money?
Man, well, first I have to check and make sure that, it was a mistake. I'm like, does this belong to me or not? Yes or no? If the answer is yes, the first thing I would do is invest in precious metals. So gold is something that holds its value. 15% off the bat invested in gold. Then I would look at strategies where there's a heightened minimum, right? So hedge funds and mutual funds will become my best friend. Why? Because I do have a high level for risk. I know that especially with hedge funds, right, there's typically a minimum of about $1 million. So about 20 to 30% hedge funds, 20% mutual funds, let someone manage that for me. Real estate is booming. So I was just in Tulum and I saw property everywhere. If they're getting ready to build an airport in Tulum in, I think, about 2 years, now is the time. So I would take about 2 to 3 million invested in properties there, knowing that I would get a pretty good return. And then the remainder, of course, I will put it in a trust. Must have the lifetime capital gain exemption. All of my investments and assets will eventually roll there. Why? Because we can't be here forever and I have to think about future generational wealth. I will have a family and children. And so I need to be able to have a place where it shields them from those taxes and allows them to really grow it. So the goal is I get 10 million today, but can I grow it to 100 million tomorrow? So to recap, metals, mutual funds, hedge funds, real estate, and I will roll it all in a trust so that I can protect my assets the best way possible. So and of course, I'll have a little fun. I'll go and take a vacation, disappear for about a month, and then I'll resurface after I've completely fallen off the grid to do some great things. So that is what I would do if 10 million magically appeared in my account.
Nice, nice. I feel like you've put some thought into this already. You've kind of planned this out already. But also, I don't think the listeners know that not only you've had a degree in finance, but you also work in finance. So it's awesome that you have a pretty well fleshed out
Absolutely.
dream for this.
Absolutely.
The MBA came in handy really, really well. So
Absolutely.
awesome answer. Awesome answer. So that is a really good question. I think we tend to ask our guests that, and I would say the answers have just been diverse. So it's just really cool that people give their perspective on how they would handle money. So I appreciate that the answer. I guess this kind of goes to my main question, which is like, the meat of why we have you here. So I've had the pleasure to have worked with you in so many, DEI efforts, when I was at AT&T. And so one thing that really sticks out for me when I work with you is your passion, basically, so drawing from your passion for community service. What would you say DEI means to you?
Yes, I think that's a solid question. And you're right. I have had the pleasure of working with both of you all in different capacities. And George served on the committee where we focused on financial literacy series. So he helped to lead that. What diversity, equity, and inclusion means to me is, and you said it, it's the ability to change someone's trajectory. It goes beyond just education. I think education is the starting point. It establishes solid, foundation, but it's giving people the tools and resources where we're not only talking about it, but how do you empower it? People, how do you create that bridge, right? So that people can not only change their trajectory, but when you impact somebody, you impact their family and other generations, right? So it's empowering people to make a change. It's closing the generational wealth gap that we see today. And then most importantly, it's about action. So diversity, equity, and inclusion is not just a buzzword. It is something that invokes action. So what are we going to do about these statistics that we see? How are we going to be a part or a change agent? And that's where I believe diversity, equity, and inclusion, and why it's had this heightened, I think, people say it, but it's popular because people understand the power of actually doing something and invoking change. And I do it every day. And I get a chance, thankfully, to leverage the network as a vehicle to really right some wrongs that we see in society and within the four walls of AT&T.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect segue to kind of like what you were mentioning about not only you've defined it and also the opportunity has given it to us in this day and age, but also how you have kind of like experience from it. And so I wanted to ask you this, where you've been part of this successful award-winning group, and you're the CEO of it, right? The network for the DFW chapter.
Absolutely.
So how would you share your perspective about launching and growing an ERG?
I think that's a good question. You have to think about it like my ERG, for example, the network was created in 1969. And if you know what the climate was, it was a need to create these groups to have a space where people can be seen and heard and understood and to push those initiatives. And so I would say that they were organically being created to fill a need, right? And even today, I think it's maybe a blend. I think they're organically happening as people see gaps of, hey, I don't see this, or I don't see myself in this place. Let's create it. But then HR naturally, because to your point, I mean, DE&I can be such a buzzword. You do see HR kind of leaning in, and I call it stirring the pot, right? To raise those numbers, to bring some awareness. I think the best DE&I efforts are ones that organically happen because it's answering a problem, it's trying to solve a problem, it's trying to actually do something. Anytime you have HR kind of, I don't want to say force feeding, but when you have HR stirring the pot, you have to ask yourself, who's really committed to driving the effort, right? Because DE&I efforts are about passion. So if someone else is kind of pushing it down, then who's really going to carry that vision? It has to come from someone who's passionate about it. So I would say the best ones organically happen. has to have a mission. What's your purpose? What are the pillars that you stand on, and how do you plan to operationalize those pillars? That's how you bring awareness. And then ultimately, that's how you see big initiatives being spun out and actually leaving the four walls of the company and impacting the community.
I appreciate that. That's actually a very, very thoughtful answer. And, just to give my perspective on that. So I think DEI started to become a big thing, post George Floyd. A lot of companies started to pick that up because they saw that was starting to be in the minds of minority employees. And one thing we've noticed following trends is a lot of those initiatives and programs for some companies have fallen flat on their faces. That's why, again, like you said, it depends. Like, does it grow organically, or are they engineered as a way to create like a smoke screen for some companies to say, hey, look, we're ticking this box, but deep down, we're not actually going down the right way to make sure like things are done properly. So I would love your perspective on that, because I think, from my workings with you, you've been with like the network for quite a while. So what do you think on that basically? So
after George Floyd, we did see a lot of companies making statements and rolling out these initiatives of, hey, we want to hire X amount, or we want to dedicate X% to minority businesses. So you did see that because there was this heightened awareness, like people were watching, like people were willing to take their dollars, right, and take it somewhere else if they felt like these companies weren't aligning to their goals. And so when these companies felt that pressure and it started to impact the bottom line, then you started to see these engineered programs and initiatives happen. Well, the reason why they fizzled is because it still goes back to, what is your commitment? What is your mission in your statement? You can't be reactive when it comes to DE&I. You have to be proactive. And so the reactive, hey, we're committed. And then once you didn't hear anything about it, or they felt like something shifted, or, something else big had happened, then that commitment was an anchor. And so it was easy to let it fizzle and just hopefully people will forget about it. But I would even argue that the climate is not going to change. We just saw, not too long ago, Tyree Nichols. And so that's probably going to spawn a whole nother, set of initiatives, a whole nother set of DE&I. Unfortunately, we cannot be reactive. I would challenge companies today to really make a stance of where they stand when it comes to DE&I, empowering their employees and being an agent of change. Because it can't come in waves. It has to be a foundation. And those who don't build it as a foundation, is really hard to really let it build and grow beyond just that initial touch point.
I appreciate that. I guess, that falls into my next question. So, what would you say your biggest advice would be for those companies who have truth to their mission in terms of like building out like a DE&I program? They have the truth to their mission. They are actually set on how they want to accomplish things. Basically, how do you get employees excited for that sort of thing?
Well, people buy into things that they feel like they had a seat at the table, right? So if I'm rolling out an initiative, I would say, have the same people that you're rolling out these programs at the table to help you to draw out and create that blueprint, because you need to have your ear to the people. It's hard to create something with someone in mind if you don't give them a seat at the table. So my first thing is have those people come in, get feedback, ask them what they actually want, ask them what the gaps are, so that you can. Yeah, that's important, so that you can create and curate something that really addresses the things that you've heard. If you are not connected to your people, and if you're not connected to even what's going on externally, macro, micro, is really hard, and you miss a really good opportunity because you don't have your pulse on the people. So that's the first thing. Put people first. Listen to what they have to say, and then always be aware of what's going on and how the environment is changing and what that means for the company, but then also what it means at a micro level, which is your people.
That's a good point because I think it's so easy for people to either see what the competitors are doing or see what the Google search is doing and then just kind of emulate that. But I think a lot of people don't realize it is a lot of hard work and you have to see what's in front of you, reach out to the people and give out those surveys. And if there's not enough responses, send it out again, ask in a different way. So I'd say like that's one of the hardest parts if they are going to take the more organic route. What would you say like any other difficult parts of implementing a DEI program?
Yeah, I also think it's do you have leadership presence? A lot of times, like it's if you don't have a leader at the table that draws complete alignment from the top to the bottom, it's hard to let it organically grow. And George and both of you guys actually. So years ago, when the CEO talked about moving beyond moving beyond tolerance to acceptance and what that mean and sharing that story, like that was important because what it signaled is, hey, I have empathy. I understand. I may not have understood that I have blind spots because of who I am. But now talking and connecting to people, I understand I have a huge blind spot. We need to move beyond this to this. And how do we get there? So I think it starts with leadership alignment that's pushing it from top to the bottom. And then it takes, organically people working collectively, reaching across the aisle, expanding the scope. Because I'm a part of the network. It's the Black integrated business professionals. 30% of our members are not Black, and so I think it's also important to expand your scope so that as you're rolling out things, you're still bringing people along, and allies are important. We need allies. We need that support. So you need leadership, you need allies, you need a clear vision, and you need the flexibility to include people who may not look like you, but that's a perfect way to educate. And then just always seek to learn. Even though I'm president, I've been president for 2 years, going on 3. I still know that there are things that I need to learn, not only about the people who are my members, but I join other EGs. I want to hear what's going on with you all. Like, what things are you all building? Can we partner? Because, if you want to go fast, you go along. But if you want to go far, you take others with you. So we have to start to find some intersectionality with other groups so that you can amplify what you're doing. You can pool your resources together. So those, is what I would say if you want to bolster a DE&I effort or build it. Leadership, pulse on the people, clear vision, inclusion, and the ability to expand your scope as you see things change. You need that flexibility to do that.
It's awesome. That is awesome. That also speaks to what we're trying to achieve here. So with this podcast, we're trying to actually show that alignment between your financial health and your mental health too as well. So a lot of people who actually go into work, there's a lot of dissatisfaction, especially when you feel you're not accepted. So you speaking on a true ecosystem for employees to actually thrive. You spoke about leadership, allyship. Can I come into work and be comfortable? That will help me be productive, and that productivity will actually help the bottom line too as well. So you actually being able to show some sort of discernment throughout all of this is just brilliant. So I really do appreciate that.
I'm passionate. I don't know if it's creeping out, but this is that really is important to me. I mean, I grew up as someone, I lived below the poverty line. Oftentimes I've experienced homelessness. So all of the things that, I'm able to now in this seat, I'm able to create initiatives to combat homelessness, right? To go and offer scholarships and have an expansive scholarship program. So I am fortunate that my experiences have led me to where I am today. It's a sense of understanding, you never forget where you come from. You remember how it felt to not have and to not have those resources. So every time I'm putting a post on something or creating something, I'm like, even if it's impacting one person, like, did we solve something? Did we help someone? Did we change the trajectory of a family? Even if it's one, that's a win. And so we have to start to, even when we're developing the metrics around it, right? Understanding that one is enough. But of course we want 100, 500, but start somewhere. We all have the ability to impact. So use what you have in your resources to do something. You may not can do a lot. And that's how DE&I efforts happen. It's doing a little bit and building on it, connecting, doing a little bit more and building on it. And before you know it, you look back, it's 2-3 years in and you've established, these string of initiatives that's really doing well. So you have to not be afraid to start somewhere.
I liked how you stated that, and also it just reminded me of another guest that we've interviewed, and she's doing phenomenal work with the public education system on introducing financial literacy at an early age. And one of the comments she made during the interview was saying something like, "What sort of sacrifices am I making that's more than what my ancestors have done, and something that's relevant to your generation or to your era." And so I think that's so cool that you're doing the same exact thing. And it's also not only because of you have a mission, drive, purpose, but also you've kind of experienced it, and so that's why you want to make these changes happen. So you going back to the partnership and ally, how would you recommend for somebody to go about those things if, let's just say, there is only one sort of minority group, but then you want to make partnership with a different minority group? So it goes true to itself of DE&I, right? Inclusion of all different groups. How would you go about that?
I think it just starts with a conversation, right? There are oftentimes forums or a way to really understand who are the leaders in these spaces. And just starting with a conversation like, hey, would love to grab some time, want to learn more about what you guys are doing, what drives you to do what you're doing, what do you have in the pipeline? Is there any opportunity? Once you learn, you may see that there is a complete alignment with some of the things that you're doing. And so then you start to have those conversations and build on, hey, you're doing this, we're doing this. It sounds like we have similar goals. Is there an opportunity as you look at your roadmap this year or next year for us to partner on this? Is there a way to even bring in some external resources? So we're not above, like, we love partnering with the EGs, right? We love having those conversations, but we also know the power of bringing community in, because it really does take a village. So we find other organizations outside of AT&T and say, hey, can we partner on this? Like, can we leverage the resources? Or even if it's, these people, we don't, can you help us get in the door? So it's being very creative, but it starts with a conversation, and it starts with, hey, what are you doing? Here's what we're doing. Let's see if we can partner. And oftentimes people, they love to feel wanted. Let's be real. And so when you go to someone and say, hey, I think what you're doing is dope. I think that if we pool our resources together, we can actually magnify or multiply the efforts by, 4 or 5-fold. Let's do this. Let's make it happen. And I mean, I'm going to speak in terms of finance. It's almost like it's a business case, right? Like, you start with, here are these inputs, but if you increase this, then this is what it can grow to, and you have a good return. And the return extends well beyond financial. The return is you've now built a solid network of people and resources that when you start to run the play on other things, you can now go into your playbook and say, hey, this person is on first, this group is on first, and expand that way. So and I'm an extrovert, so I don't mind talking to anyone I don't know. I will introduce myself and then have a conversation there, because to me, the goal is much, much bigger than that awkward moment of, hey, you don't know me. It's bigger than that. So just hop in there and know that people want to be wanted and seen. So I doubt people really push back.
Hey, if you made it this far into this episode, George and I want to give you a big thank you. It means a lot to us that you find our content valuable.
And it will mean the world to us if you hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. This would help this episode and future episodes discovered by many others who find this as valuable as you did.
Again, thank you, and let's get back to the episode. Well, also, I liked how you brought up that it's like if you look at it as a business, right? Like if you think of two companies doing a joint venture, a JV, and I think with like partnerships, it's kind of some people might have the fear of stepping on other people's toes, but it really is that you can find other ways to save costs, right? But also see the similarities of the purpose and the goal, but also the differences you have that you can bring in as that synergistic opportunity, right?
It's about diversification. We learned it. Like I know we all have books where we can go back and diversification. Same thing when it comes to DE&I. Like there are so many pockets and issues that we collectively are solving. You have to diversify even the people that you have at the table, a diversification of thought of the type of resources. Like we may be over-indexed here and they may be over-indexed there. Okay, well now we're talking because you're filling some gaps. And so you have to not be afraid to diversify your network when it comes to DE&I, because there are so many things that we're trying to solve for, from, education, resources, homelessness. Like, how do you target it? Well, you have to diversify your village and be willing to get in the trenches. Like, I think that's what a true DE&I program, it's not afraid to get in the trenches to solve a problem. Surface level DE&I programs, they fizzle just like that. Nobody talks about it. It falls flat. But people who are in the trenches and really know the power of targeting, generation or closing that wealth gap. Like, for example, we have some things, and we'll talk about it a little bit later, that, we asked our members, what's going on? What's important to you? What are some pain points? And they came back and said, hey, home ownership. Like, I don't feel like I can buy a house now. Inflation is high. Interest rates are like, I'm priced out of the market. And so then that automatically said, okay, well, what can we create? Who can we bring to the table to actually start to provide some resources and solutioning? So it's getting in the trenches enough to find where the issues are and then roll up your sleeves to solve it. So it's fun.
Who would have known the fundamentals of finance would be answering our hard-hitting DE&I question?
Right.
and especially like towards when you're building like your return on investment statement. So you have a program idea. I remember so when I worked with you on like setting up the financial literacy class, like a couple of years ago, I remember when we started to fill out for like partners and stuff. I think what happened is because we had such a solid ROI statement, like, so when we came into rooms and said, hey, what are you hoping to get with this? But because we had proactively done like temperature checks on like members, what gap are you looking to fill? A lot of people said, hey, I want to save more. I want to know how to budget. And we focused those, writing out that program based on that. And the success was just like really awesome. So that does make sense. I think importantly, that ability that you do a temperature check first to make sure at least you are hitting the right notes, then the rest is history. So, what would you say, we've discussed about, we've had conversations around okay, your mission, your vision, going about getting the right partnerships. What would you say from your experience, has been the most difficult part of implementing a DEI program? I mean, I know you've actually held and implemented tons. You're one of the most hardworking people I know. And so what would you say from your experience, can you share with our listeners has been the most difficult part of that?
I think that the most difficult part is being, we don't always have the resources, and that's from financial or just human capital, oftentimes. So I know, and we've seen it across, industries, there's massive layoffs, impacting everyone. And so naturally for me as president, I lost 4 e-board members in a matter of 4 months. And so imagine, you're ready to go on some things that we've done a post check. We've checked the box and said, hey, this is good. This answers the mail. And then you lose resources that kind of was instrumental in helping you get there. And so then there's the whole mental aspect, right? So we're leaving COVID. And so people were naturally just trying to find their way. And so I think the most challenging thing, honestly, was when we were dealing with, I call it the perfect storm. COVID was here, and the remnants of that, we still feel it today. Even the economy was impacted. So companies are having layoffs. And so it's really getting people or galvanizing people and getting them to be connected, right? And so what I had to do was target a different issue. So the whole physical and mental health. And I know it sounds crazy because we're talking finance and this is the Dapper Dollar podcast, but oftentimes you can't pour from an empty cup. And so I said, okay, I know that we want to launch these things because this is what we heard, but this is what we're seeing. And so it goes back to the flexibility of saying, I know that this is the mission. I know that these are the pillars. We have to be hyper focused on this because if we solve this, then we can solve these other things. And it was learning to scale back. Sometimes you have to take a moment, scale back and reset. It doesn't mean that the DE&I efforts fizzle, but you have to take into consideration all those things and make adjustments. We made some adjustments, still challenging, right? Dealing with all of those things and lack of resources. But now we're at a place I finally bought in we're swearing in my last member next week. But now we're at a place where, we're fully staffed, still have some of the same challenges, but it's learning to, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? You make adjustments, you see where you can maybe scale back, still do the initiative. It's okay to do a pilot, a soft pilot, because some people think D&I, it has to be big. Like, it has to be big. It has to be this. DE&I efforts, it doesn't have to be big to make an impact. It's okay to do pilots. It's okay to adjust. It's okay to make tweaks. Don't lose the fervor, but make adjustments until you weather those storms, because we're always going to have pockets of things that impacts and throws us off the path. But how committed are you and how flexible are you to actually achieving the goal? You may have to push your timeline out. That's okay. You may have to, move dollars from here to there. That's okay. But until you can get to the place where you can do a full out, whatever that is, be okay with scaling back as you weather the storm. And that has worked for us. We, even in the midst of all of that, I told George in another conversation, we won our first award at our employee resource conference. And we've been trying to win for like 5 years. And so, yeah, but when you sow seeds like DE&I would equate it to, you have to sow the seeds. And so when you sow seeds, you have to toil the soil. It's hard to break that ground up to sow those seeds, but you have to toil, you have to sow those seeds. But guess what? The harvest does come with these DE&I initiatives. If you're consistently not only sow the seeds, but are you cultivating? Are you nourishing? Are you giving it water? Are you actually paying attention to these things? If yes, then you'll see the harvest. You'll see the manifestation of all of those things rolled up into one. And so my biggest encouragement to people who may be discouraged as they're in the beginning of their DE&I journey, toil the soil, sow those seeds. The harvest will come, but you have to be consistent. You have to be committed, because little things grow into big things. And so never count yourself out and think that you can't make that impact, but you have to honestly, start somewhere.
I like that. Especially your call out towards recognition. I think as human beings, we're wired as to when we're recognized for something, it kind of galvanizes us to go do more. And, that makes you bigger and better, basically. And you feel appreciated too as well. What would you say, what part would you say funding plays towards like implementing programs? I know a lot of DEI programs, they fall flat because sometimes they don't have that leadership support in terms of like being funded. So from your experience, is that something you call out as being a difficulty as well?
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, when I came in, as I started as the chief program officer, and then I, of course, got elected as president. But the main thing that I noticed that we just didn't have the budget. We were looking at other adjacent EGs, and they had these executive sponsors that was giving them like 25,000, 30,000, 40,000, you name it. And so I started to look and I'm like, man, we don't even have a fraction of that. Like, how do we get there? Like, because we didn't have it. We didn't have, I mean, when I said, and it's interesting, I would say, hey, I'm president of the network. And people would say, what's the network? What do you mean? We were like the first EG ever at AT&T, and people didn't know who we were. And so we had to navigate the fact that there was not a lot of brand awareness. We didn't have deep pockets. We didn't have sponsors. And so what we did, and what I would encourage other people to do, is we started what we call fundraising efforts to help create this funnel. So we rolled out Celebration of the Arts. It was this way to highlight minority talent in the city. So singers, painters, musicians, like you name it, everything in the art. So people came out and they were vibing, they were having a good time. Well, guess what? We made $5,000 in profit that year. And that 5,000 created the first, we created the Celebration of the Arts Scholarship. And so we were able to award. So we didn't award 5 because we had to, pay back some things or invest in other things, but we awarded 3,000, and then we created other programs. So we called them, fundraising efforts that had dual purpose. And we call it Party with a Purpose. So we tend to do things that people entertainment focus, that was front facing, but we were taking all of those funds and we were planning it in areas that we know that we wanted to grow in. So we launched the eSteam program with Family Gateway. It's a homeless shelter provider, because we felt like that was a blind spot. Our children that are impacted by homelessness still need an opportunity to compete and to have the lifestyle that everyone hopes for. So we were able to launch the eSteam program for students impacted by homelessness. Then we were able to do Juneteenth, which was a big program. And we launched our Juneteenth sneaker ball last year. We bought in 15,000. Well, guess what? That was able to fund our minority case competition that we want to launch. And so I would say, be creative. Like, if you don't have the resources, find a way to creatively. And then we ask for sponsors. So not only within AT&T, we found other, businesses and say, hey, this is what we're trying to do. Because the worst someone can say is no. We had a couple of no's, but we had more yeses when people said, hey, we like what you're doing. We'll donate this, or we'll donate the venue for you, or we'll donate. And so we were fortunate to find people to align with what we were doing and articulate that vision, where then we created this funnel, and now we're in a very healthy place without sponsorship, right? So we were able to pad our accounts, where now we can do multiple things, but that didn't stop there. We're looking into grants. So we have someone who did grant writing, like how can we leverage grants to do some of these things? How do we, tap into some of the leaders, right, who are sponsoring these other EGs? How do we make friends and bring them to the table? So you have to be creative. The worst someone can say is no. Sometimes it's as simple as asking, and then be able to articulate it, though, because it's one thing to say, hey, I would like 20,000. And somebody's like, okay, 20,000. But it's another thing to say, hey, I want 20,000. I want to take this 20,000, I want to put 5,000 towards, building out this program. I want to take another, 6, 7,000 to put into the scholarship program. When you can support and articulate the ask, a lot of times people are more inclined. It's all about business case. You got to talk about the costs and the benefits. And it's always, hey, this is what we're going to do with it. And you have to be a good steward of those resources. So, yep, we had those problems, but we just found a creative way to generate that funnel until we can get the sponsorships to come in.
You mind if I ask you, do you typically, do your sponsors, aka investors, do they ask for an ROI, or is it really a sponsorship and because they believe in the cause, or does it vary?
It varies. A lot of times, it's they believe in the cause, and they themselves, sometimes small businesses really understand and could connect with some of the things that we're saying. But other things, it's like, hey, we'll give you 3,000, but I need my name everywhere. I need this poster here. I need you in all the publications, because they need to expand their footprint, right? Because this is a marketing opportunity for them. And so we've gotten smarter. When we are engaging investors, we'll say, hey, here's what's in it for you. Here's the vision and here's what we're trying to solve for, but here's what's in it for you. Heighten awareness, expand your footprint, visibility to some senior executive leaders who could open the door for other business opportunities. So we've learned to speak the jargon and say the words that people want to hear, because, it oftentimes, it is a business for some of them. And so we want to make sure that both parties walk away and feel like they're leaving the table with something. No one wants to leave money on the table. No one wants to leave resources on the table. So we try to make sure that we're honoring that and respecting our investors and giving them something to walk away with too.
Let's say now that you've gotten the funding, you did a program, and then how do you exactly measure or track that success for the employees or for the program, for the members of that ERG?
Yeah, no, I think that's a solid question. I think it's important to establish the metrics before you actually do the program. And so it comes in the initial ideation phase. And so one example I would use is we're launching our financial empowerment series, very similar to financial literacy, but we felt like financial empowerment was just more powerful. It was a powerful statement. So we're launching a financial empowerment series. We call it 2-Track Tuesdays. So I will share information once we launch it. We actually have our first one February the 28th. But before we roll it out, we're partnering with Fincast and Ostrich. We said, hey, what does success look like? What are we trying to solve? Yes, we want to empower, but what do we want to solve? And the two things we said is we want to talk financial wellness. How do they navigate the economic pressures that we're seeing today? And what's the pathway to home ownership? Because remember, we did a pulse check. And one of the things that was glaring was our members said, hey, I don't think I can buy a house. So we made sure that we created 2 tracks. And so what success looks like is, are we getting, people to actually come? Did we expand our reach? Did we do a good job marketing it? Because it's hard to change something if people are not in the room. Fincast is a company that created this algorithm that anomalizes, who you are, your race, so that you have a more favorable rate. And so they're in the process of working with getting capital, but it's something that is work, and they're partnering with Freddie Mac and all of these other firms and bringing people to the table because they created it with minorities in mind. They said, hey, minorities typically pay more in interest rates. They're paying more for their house. And even when they sell their house, they're getting less for their house. So he created this to solve that. And so we have Benjamin from Fincast, who's helping to lead that. He's bringing some friends along from other adjacent industries. And the goal there is, can we have at least 20 or more people who are interested in buying a house? Can we connect them to the right people because they will be in the room? 20 or more, check. That's a metric. For the financial wellness, we have Ostrich, which is a financial wellness company. William, who is the co-founder, partnered with Christina Brooks now. Sorry, she changed her name. But they're talking about financial wellness, and they're talking about here are the resources that you need in very similar, savings. What ways can you change your portfolio? And so it's pairing at least 20 or more to that. Now, 20 is a low number, yes, but it's just a baseline. Of course, we want to knock it out the park, but you have to start somewhere. And if we're able to achieve that, then when we do it again the next quarter after we do a survey, well, what's pressing, right? And then we start to curate very actionable initiatives around what we're hearing that people need, and then bringing the right people in the room so that they can talk to these people and get these resources and begin to do things that they felt like they could never do. And that's powerful when someone says, I don't think I can buy a house. And then you pair them with the right person. And months later, they're talking about they're a first time homeowner. That is powerful. And so that is, you have to start with what does success look like in mind? And then you work backwards. And so that's how we typically look at it. And then, of course, we're using, sponsorship dollars from different, leaders in the business. And so then we can go back to them and say, hey, these funds that you gave us, here's how many we had in the room. Here's how many people were actually had a pathway. And then you can actually report on it, and they can really feel like they had a good return on that investment because of the metrics that you came back and communicated to them.
That is actually a very awesome, initiative. I think, my big takeaway from that is just how that sort of manifests into a snowball effect. For example, someone who doesn't know about about a home or learning to invest, and you take that, and that person comes in and has a workshop or two, then that knowledge, and you're sitting within friends and family, and then you get to teach them too as well. They take that, and in a way, it always starts to create awareness where, just from one seed, you grow a whole tree. So that is brilliant. I like that. I like that. The harvest. Exactly.
You have a harvest. You really, I think the thing that I always keep in mind is when you touch one person, you touch a family, and you touch generations to come. And if you always keep that at the forefront, then those sacrifices, because I don't get paid to be president of the network. I do not get paid. I don't get a kickback. I don't get invited to any special events. This is strictly, voluntary for me. And sometimes it's a lot of hours. And what makes the sacrifice worth it is when you hear those success stories, when you see children, we do a coat and shoe drive every year. So when you see people really being impacted by what you do, that's enough to, I think, keep you motivated and inspired. I don't think I'll ever get tired of it.
Brilliant. So I just want to say thank you for being on the show, and for our listeners, and people who are hearing about this topic for the first time. And I feel just the takeaways are just tremendous. And so just for people who want to kind of connect with you past this, which I'm pretty sure they would, can you let our listeners know how they can connect with you?
Absolutely. There are a couple of ways. Of course, I'm always on LinkedIn. I've learned the power of LinkedIn. So LaDrica Derrico on LinkedIn. From a social media handle, Drica, DRICA _ the diva is my IG handle. If you guys ever want to find me and just have conversation, or if you want to follow the NETwork DFW's IG, it's the NETwork NETwork _ DFW. You can also get in contact with me that way. Would love to help you with your DE&I strategy. Let's be great. Let's make 2023 so much better than 2022 was. And let's move beyond just talking about it to actually doing something. Let's do that this year as well.
Hey, thank you again for being on the show. I loved how even from the beginning, you talked about, reach out to your audience, reach out to what do they want. And then you're able to share that, your experiences and your successes that came about. How does it look like to launch a program? So we appreciate all the advice that you've given us. And also finally, we want to thank our listeners out there thank you for tuning in. Really help us out if you can smash that like button and subscribe to our channel.
And if you want to reach out to us again, like you love this topic, feel free to leave a comment and we'll be sure to reach out to you. And all the links, especially LaDrica's handles, will be written out in the description box below across all channels.
Last but not least, don't forget to look good, feel good, do good. See you at the next episode.
Bye.
Wanna hear you go.